There comes a moment in life when love no longer feels like pursuit, proof, or performance. It arrives quietly, with gravity, as if something ancient inside you has finally been recognized. This is not the love that begs for attention or demands sacrifice. This is the love that sees you, and in seeing you, treats you as something sacred. You will notice it first in how this person approaches you. There is no rush to claim, no hunger to consume. Instead, there is reverence. Their presence feels intentional, as though they have stepped into a temple and lowered their voice without being asked. Around you, they become more careful, more honest, more awake. You are not an object of desire alone. You are a meaning they do not wish to distort. This person does not try to reshape you into their fantasy. They do not carve pieces away to make you fit. What they recognize in you is something whole, something worthy of preservation. Your contradictions do not confuse them. Your shadows do not frighten them. They understand that depth is born from tension, and they honor the parts of you that were once misunderstood or hidden away for survival. To place someone on a sacred altar is not to worship them blindly. It is to approach them with responsibility. This person knows that love is not ownership but stewardship. They listen not only to your words, but to the pauses between them. They sense when your silence is full, when it is wounded, when it is simply resting. With them, you do not need to explain your inner weather. They feel its changes intuitively. You will feel this love in the way they protect your dignity, even when you are not present. They speak your name gently in rooms you never enter. They defend your essence without turning you into an idol. Their loyalty is not loud, but it is unshakable. It does not depend on your perfection. It is rooted in recognition. This person understands that love is a mirror that must not lie. When they reflect you back to yourself, it is clearer than before. You begin to see your own value without exaggeration or shame. Through their eyes, you rediscover parts of yourself that were buried under disappointment, neglect, or self-doubt. Their love does not inflate your ego. It strengthens your core. Being honored like this may feel unfamiliar at first. If you have known love as chaos, reverence can feel unreal. You may instinctively wait for the moment it collapses, for the price you must eventually pay. But this love asks for no self-erasure. It does not require you to bleed to prove your worth. It asks only that you remain true, because truth is what it honors most. There is something ritualistic in how this person loves you. Small gestures carry weight. Attention becomes devotion. Consistency becomes a form of prayer. They show up not to impress, but to remain. In their presence, love feels less like a feeling and more like a vow made in silence and kept daily. This connection awakens something archetypal within you. You recognize it not because it is dramatic, but because it is deeply familiar, as though your soul has been preparing for this recognition across time. You feel less fragmented, less divided against yourself. Love in this form integrates you. When someone places you on their sacred altar, they are not elevating you above themselves. They are elevating the bond. They understand that what exists between you is larger than both of you, and they treat it with care. This is why their love feels safe without becoming dull, deep without becoming heavy. Prepare yourself for this kind of love by unlearning the belief that intensity equals truth. Learn to receive without bracing for loss. Learn to stand still when you are cherished. This person will not ask you to abandon who you are. They will ask you to arrive fully. And when they do, you will realize that being honored with love is not about being chosen above all others, but about being chosen correctly. You will be approached with reverence, not urgency, and your presence will be treated as something sacred rather than something to be possessed. This kind of approach is subtle, almost quiet, and because of that, it is often misunderstood at first. There is no dramatic chase, no overwhelming declarations, no attempt to seize your attention through intensity or pressure. Instead, There is a calm awareness, as if this person has already decided that you are not something to rush toward, but something to stand before. Their energy does not invade your space, it respects it. You feel seen without being scanned, noticed without being evaluated, acknowledged without being reduced. Reverence changes the entire tone of connection. It removes hunger from love and replaces it with intention. This person does not approach you from a place of lack, as though they need to take something from you to feel complete. They approach you from fullness, and from that fullness comes care. You sense that they are not trying to extract validation, pleasure, or identity from you. What draws them is not what you can give, but what you are. There is a difference between being desired and being honored, and your body recognizes it immediately. Your nervous system softens instead of bracing. You do not feel the need to perform, impress, or protect yourself. Urgency is often rooted in fear, the fear of loss, the fear of competition, the fear that if one does not act quickly, something will be taken away. Reverence has no such fear. This person is patient not because they are indifferent, but because they understand the weight of connection. They know that what is rushed is often mishandled. Their movements toward you are deliberate, thoughtful, almost ceremonial. Even silence with them feels intentional, not neglectful. Time does not feel like an enemy in their presence. It feels like a container. When someone treats your presence as sacred, they are careful with their words. They do not speak carelessly about you or to you. They sense that language has power, that words can wound or preserve, and they choose them with awareness. They do not test boundaries to see how much they can take. They observe boundaries to understand how best to protect what exists between you. You feel this in small moments, in how they pause before responding, in how they listen without preparing to interrupt, in how they remember details that were never announced as important. Being treated as sacred does not mean being idealized. In fact, it is the opposite. Idealization strips a person of their humanity and turns them into an image. Reverence keeps humanity intact. This person does not deny your flaws or pretend you are flawless. They simply do not use your imperfections as leverage. They do not hold your vulnerability as a bargaining chip. They understand that what is real is more valuable than what is perfect, and so they approach you with respect rather than projection. You may notice that they do not try to mark you as theirs through control or jealousy. Possession is loud. It announces itself through insecurity, through surveillance, through subtle claims over your time, your attention, your choices. Reverence is quiet. It trusts. This person does not need to cage what they value. They know that what is honored freely remains willingly. Their confidence does not come from dominance, but from alignment. They do not fear your autonomy, they admire it. There is also a sense that this person sees beyond your surface identity. They are not only responding to your role, your appearance, your achievements, or your usefulness. They are responding to something deeper, something archetypal within you. You feel recognized in a way that is difficult to articulate, as though an inner part of you, long unseen, has finally been addressed directly. This recognition carries weight. It feels older than preference, deeper than attraction. In their presence, you are not hurried into intimacy. Emotional closeness unfolds naturally, like a door opening rather than being forced. This person allows trust to grow at its own pace. They do not demand immediate access to your inner world. They wait to be invited, and when they are, they enter gently. This patience communicates something profound, that you are not a conquest, not a reward, not a prize to be won, but a reality to be approached with care. You may find that they are protective of your energy. They notice when you are tired, overwhelmed, or withdrawn, and instead of taking it personally, they adjust. They do not punish you for needing space. They do not interpret your silence as rejection. Their response is attuned rather than reactive. This attunement creates safety. and safety allows you to exist without armor. To be treated as sacred is also to be mirrored with honesty. Reverence does not flatter. This person does not lie to keep you close. When they reflect you back to yourself, it is with clarity, not distortion. You feel more grounded in their presence, more aligned with who you actually are. Their respect strengthens your self-respect. You become more careful with yourself because you sense that someone else already is. This kind of approach may feel unfamiliar if you have known love as chaos, pursuit, or emotional volatility. At first, you might mistake their calm for lack of interest, their patience for distance, their restraint for hesitation. But over time, you realize that what they are offering is rare. They are offering you a space where you are not consumed, not rushed, not reduced, but held in awareness. Being approached with reverence means that even conflict is handled differently. There is no desire to dominate or win. Disagreements are not used as opportunities to assert power. Instead, there is an underlying commitment to preservation, to understanding, to maintaining the dignity of the bond. This person argues without erasing, speaks without demeaning, and listens even when it is uncomfortable. Your presence, in their eyes, carries meaning. And because it carries meaning, it carries responsibility. They do not take you lightly. They do not show up half-heartedly. They understand that when something is sacred, how you engage with it matters. This awareness shapes their behavior, their choices, their consistency. You feel it in the steadiness of their actions, in the absence of manipulation, in the lack of games. Over time, you begin to feel that you can rest into this connection, not collapse, not disappear, but rest. You do not have to guard your worth or prove your value. You do not have to compete for attention or chase reassurance. You are allowed to simply be present, knowing that your presence is already enough, knowing that you are not being measured by what you provide, but respected for what you embody, knowing that this approach is not driven by urgency, but by recognition, not by possession, but by honor, and that in being treated as sacred, something within you remembers how to stand without fear, how to open without losing yourself, how to receive without bracing, how to exist in connection without shrinking, without hardening, without disappearing into expectation, as the bond unfolds not through force, but through a steady awareness that continues to deepen as time moves, as silence speaks, as presence remains, as meaning quietly accumulates in the space between two people who are not trying to take from each other, but are instead learning how to approach what matters with care. This person will recognize and honor both your light and your shadow without trying to change or diminish either. This recognition does not happen through analysis or judgment, but through a quiet acceptance that feels deeply unsettling at first, because most people have been loved conditionally, selectively, or strategically. You are used to being valued for what is pleasant, impressive, or useful, and tolerated for what is difficult. But here, nothing in you is treated as a problem to be fixed. Your brightness is not exploited, and your darkness is not feared. They sense that your light did not appear without cost. They understand that your strength was forged through experience, not granted by luck. They do not romanticize your resilience in a way that ignores your pain. Instead, they respect it. They see how much effort it took to become who you are, how many internal battles were fought quietly, how many times you had to choose consciousness over collapse. Your competence does not intimidate them, and your depth does not overwhelm them. At the same time, they do not recoil from your shadow. They are not startled by your contradictions, your moods, your moments of withdrawal or intensity. They do not label these parts as flaws or weaknesses. They recognize them as expressions of something unresolved, something human, something meaningful. Rather than asking you to suppress these parts, they make space for them. Their presence communicates that you do not have to amputate parts of yourself to be loved. This kind of recognition reaches places in you that were shaped by shame. Many people learn early that certain emotions, desires, or instincts make them unlovable, so they bury them, disguise them, or project them onto others. But this person notices those buried parts and does not turn away. They do not demand that you be consistent, predictable, or endlessly positive. They allow you to be complex. This permission alone begins to soften the internal war you may not have realized you were fighting. They understand that the shadow is not evil. It is unintegrated life. It is emotion that was never given language, impulse that was never understood, pain that was never witnessed. Instead of reacting to your shadow, they remain curious. They listen beneath your reactions. They notice patterns without weaponizing them. Their awareness is steady enough that your inner chaos does not feel dangerous around them. You may notice that around this person, you begin to reveal yourself without planning to. Stories emerge that you did not intend to share. Emotions surface without being forced. This is not because they extract information, but because their non-judgment creates psychological safety. Your unconscious senses that it is no longer under threat. When the shadow is no longer hunted, it no longer needs to hide. Honoring both light and shadow means they do not pedestalize you. They do not need you to remain flawless in order to maintain their image of you. When you disappoint them, they do not collapse into disillusionment. When you struggle, they do not withdraw their respect. They are grounded enough to hold a whole person, not just an ideal. This groundedness makes their love feel real rather than fragile. They also do not use your shadow against you. Vulnerabilities shared in trust are not stored as ammunition for later conflict. Your past is not repeatedly brought up to control your present. They do not reduce you to your worst moments. Instead, they see those moments as part of a larger narrative, one that includes growth, intention, and self-awareness. Their memory of you is integrated, not selective. This kind of honoring invites you into self-responsibility rather than self-condemnation. Because they do not shame your shadow, you are more willing to examine it. You begin to notice your patterns without immediately defending them. You become curious about your own reactions rather than trapped inside them. Their acceptance does not enable unconscious behavior. It encourages integration. You may feel challenged by this at times. Being fully seen can feel more exposing than being criticized. When someone does not reject your shadow, you can no longer pretend it does not exist. Their calm reflection holds up a mirror that does not distort. You are invited to meet yourself honestly. This can feel destabilizing because it removes excuses and illusions at the same time. They honor your light without clinging to it. They do not demand that you remain strong for them. They do not feed on your optimism or depend on your emotional labor. They appreciate your generosity without exploiting it. When you are tired, they do not punish you by withdrawing affection. They do not confuse your worth with your output. This balance between light and shadow creates an unusual dynamic. You feel less split within yourself. Parts of you that once felt incompatible begin to coexist. You are allowed to be confident and uncertain, loving and angry, grounded and searching. This internal permission reduces the need for masks. You do not have to curate yourself to remain acceptable. Their honoring is subtle but consistent. It shows in how they respond when you express difficult truths. It shows in their willingness to stay present when conversations become uncomfortable. It shows in their refusal to oversimplify you. They understand that depth cannot be flattened without being destroyed. Because they accept your shadow, you do not feel the urge to act it out unconsciously. When the shadow is acknowledged, it loses its compulsive power. You become more choiceful, more aware, more integrated. Love becomes a container for growth rather than a stage for reenactment. This person understands that wholeness is not purity. It is coherence. It is the ability to hold opposing truths without fragmentation. Their love does not ask you to transcend your humanity. It asks you to inhabit it fully, and in doing so, you begin to feel more solid, more authentic, more at ease within yourself. There is a quiet dignity that emerges when both light and shadow are honored. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop editing your inner world to fit someone else's comfort. You realize that being accepted does not mean being indulged, and being challenged does not mean being rejected. This relationship becomes a place where inner work is not forced but supported. Over time, you may notice that your relationship with yourself changes. The harsh inner critic softens, the need to hide diminishes. You begin to trust your own depth. This transformation does not happen because you were fixed, but because you were allowed to be whole, because someone stood in front of you and said nothing needs to be removed for you to be worthy. Nothing needs to be exaggerated for you to be valued. Nothing needs to be denied for you to be loved, and in that recognition, something ancient within you relaxes. Something fragmented begins to align. Something long exiled is quietly welcomed back into consciousness, as you remain fully seen without being reduced, fully accepted without being absorbed, fully honored without being idealized, while the bond continues to deepen through the steady presence of someone who understands that love is not about choosing only the light, but about standing with the entire human being as they are revealed layer by layer in time. Their love will protect your dignity, remain consistent, and strengthen your sense of self rather than demand sacrifice. This protection is not dramatic or performative. It does not announce itself through grand gestures or public declarations. It reveals itself quietly in moments when it would be easier to look away, to stay silent, or to choose convenience over integrity. This person understands that dignity is fragile, and once damaged, it is difficult to restore. Because of that, they handle you with care, even when emotions run high, even when circumstances are complicated, even when no one is watching. You feel this protection in how they speak to you during disagreement. They do not aim to humiliate, overpower, or emotionally corner you. Their words may be honest, even firm, but they are never cruel. They do not use your insecurities as leverage. They do not strike below the surface to win an argument. Preserving your dignity matters to them more than being right. This choice creates a sense of safety that allows conflict to exist without becoming destructive. Consistency is another quiet language of their love. Not the kind that is rigid or mechanical, but the kind that is reliable without being suffocating. They show up when they say they will. Their tone does not shift unpredictably. You are not left guessing where you stand from one day to the next. Their care does not disappear when you are inconvenient, tired, or emotionally complex. Over time, this steadiness rewires something inside you. You stop scanning for danger. You stop bracing for abandonment disguised as independence. Many people confuse intensity with commitment. This person does not. Their love does not spike and vanish. It does not burn hot and then go cold. It unfolds at a human pace, grounded and sustainable. They understand that trust is built through repetition, through small acts done consistently rather than through occasional emotional surges. Their presence becomes something you can lean on without fear of collapse. What makes this love different is that it does not require you to diminish yourself to maintain it. You are not asked to sacrifice your voice, your values, your ambitions, or your inner truth to keep them close. They do not frame compromise as self-erasure. When adjustments are needed, they are mutual, conscious, and respectful. You do not feel like you are constantly giving something up in exchange for connection. This person does not mistake love for endurance. They do not believe that suffering is proof of devotion. They do not romanticize your pain or expect you to tolerate disrespect for the sake of togetherness. If something costs you your self-respect, they do not ask you to pay that price. In fact, They are attentive to moments when you begin to shrink, when your energy dulls, when your authenticity fades. They notice and they care. Protecting your dignity also means protecting your reputation, your privacy, your inner world. They do not expose your vulnerabilities to others for validation or sympathy. What you share with them is treated as sacred information, not social currency. They do not weaponize your past, your mistakes, or your struggles. They understand that trust, once broken, alters the entire architecture of a relationship. Their consistency strengthens your sense of self because it allows you to relax into who you are rather than constantly adapting to keep someone interested. You are not required to perform emotional labor to regulate their moods. You are not responsible for holding the relationship together alone. Their emotional availability is not conditional upon your compliance or silence. This balance restores a sense of equality that many connections lack. You begin to feel more grounded in your own identity around them. Your opinions sharpen. Your boundaries become clearer, not because you are defending yourself, but because you feel safe enough to be honest. Their respect invites your self-respect to rise. You are less tempted to betray yourself for closeness. You learn that intimacy does not require abandonment of self. This person understands that love should expand you, not consume you. They encourage your growth even when it does not directly benefit them. They are not threatened by your independence or success. They do not subtly compete with you. They do not resent your evolution. Instead, they see your becoming as part of the bond rather than a risk to it. When challenges arise, they do not disappear. Consistency means they remain engaged even when things are uncomfortable. They do not punish you with withdrawal. They do not create instability to gain control. Their steadiness becomes an anchor, something you can orient yourself around. Over time, this creates an internal steadiness as well. You trust yourself more because you are no longer constantly destabilized by someone else's unpredictability. Their love does not demand sacrifice, but it does invite responsibility. Not responsibility for their happiness, but responsibility for mutual respect. You are held accountable without being shamed. You are challenged without being diminished. This balance allows growth without fear. You do not have to choose between being loved and being authentic. You may notice that with them, you are less reactive. Old patterns lose their grip. When you are treated with dignity consistently, your nervous system recalibrates. You no longer expect chaos as proof of closeness. Calm no longer feels suspicious. Stability no longer feels boring. It feels nourishing. They protect your dignity even when you are not at your best. When you falter, they do not define you by that moment. When you struggle, they do not step away. They recognize the difference between behavior and identity. This distinction allows repair instead of rupture. You learn that mistakes do not equal abandonment. Over time, this kind of love strengthens your inner structure. You stand taller, not because you are inflated, but because you are supported. You make choices that align with your values because you are not constantly negotiating your worth. You feel less fragmented, less compromised, less divided between who you are and who you think you must be to be loved. Their consistency becomes a mirror through which you learn consistency with yourself. You begin to treat your own boundaries with more respect. You stop tolerating what erodes you. You become more discerning, not more guarded. Love becomes something that fortifies rather than depletes. This person does not ask you to bleed to prove devotion. They do not equate loyalty with self-neglect. They understand that a relationship built on sacrifice eventually breeds resentment. Instead, they cultivate reciprocity. Giving flows naturally because it is not coerced. Care is offered freely because it is returned. You may realize that this love feels quiet but powerful. There is no constant anxiety. no emotional bargaining, no fear-driven attachment. Just a steady sense that you are allowed to exist fully, that your dignity is intact, that your selfhood is not under threat. And in that space, love does not weaken you. It strengthens you from the inside, reinforcing your boundaries, clarifying your values, deepening your self-trust, allowing you to remain whole rather than fragmented, present rather than depleted, connected rather than consumed, as the bond continues not through sacrifice, but through mutual respect, reliability, and a shared commitment to preserving what makes each of you fully human. Through this bond, love becomes an integrating force that brings wholeness, safety, and quiet depth. It does not arrive as a dramatic event or an emotional rupture, but as a gradual internal alignment. You begin to notice that parts of you that once felt disconnected start to communicate with each other. The mind no longer fights the heart. The past no longer competes so loudly with the present. What once felt fragmented slowly organizes itself around a shared center, and that center is not obsession or fear, but meaning. This integration happens because the bond does not pull you out of yourself. Instead, it draws you inward. You are not distracted from your inner life by the relationship. You are guided deeper into it. Love becomes a space where self-reflection is possible without collapsing into self-criticism. You are able to observe your emotions, desires, and reactions without feeling overwhelmed by them. The relationship becomes a container strong enough to hold complexity. Safety is the foundation of this process. Not the safety of stagnation or predictability, but the safety that allows growth without threat. You feel secure enough to explore yourself honestly. You are not afraid that discovering something uncomfortable within you will cost you connection. This safety quiets the internal alarm system that was built during times when love felt conditional or unstable. Your nervous system begins to recognize that closeness does not require vigilance. Within this bond, you are not split between who you are alone and who you are with someone else. There is continuity. Your inner and outer selves begin to resemble each other more closely. You speak more freely because you are not calculating the consequences of truth. You listen more deeply because you are not defending against misunderstanding. This coherence brings a sense of wholeness that feels unfamiliar if you have lived divided for a long time. Quiet depth emerges naturally. There is no need for constant stimulation or emotional intensity to keep the bond alive. Conversations may be simple, but they feel layered. Silence does not signal distance, it signals comfort. You are able to sit together without filling the space with noise. Depth reveals itself not through dramatic confession, but through presence, through shared attention, through mutual awareness. This love integrates past wounds without reopening them unnecessarily. You may find old memories surfacing, but they do so gently, without hijacking the present. The bond does not force healing, but it allows it. Pain is not erased, but it is contextualized. It becomes part of a larger story rather than the defining chapter. You are no longer living from unresolved fragments. You are relating from a more unified self. In this integration, you stop projecting unmet needs onto the other person. You are not asking them to rescue you from yourself or complete what feels missing. Instead, you meet them as someone who is also whole and becoming. The relationship becomes a meeting of two inner worlds rather than an attempt to merge out of lack. This balance preserves individuality while deepening connection. Safety within this bond also means emotional regulation becomes shared without being outsourced. You are not responsible for managing their inner chaos, and they are not responsible for managing yours. Yet, there is support. When one of you is overwhelmed, the other remains grounded. This dynamic creates resilience. Challenges are met without collapse. Stress does not automatically translate into conflict. Wholeness is felt in how you move through life beyond the relationship. You make decisions with greater clarity. You are less reactive to external pressures. Your sense of identity feels less fragile. Love, instead of consuming your energy, seems to generate it. You are not constantly recovering from emotional upheaval. You have more capacity for creativity, focus, and presence. This bond does not rush integration. It understands that depth develops over time. Trust is not demanded, it is cultivated. Vulnerability is invited, not extracted. You are allowed to reveal yourself gradually. There is patience for your process, for your rhythm, for the way you open. This patience itself becomes healing. You may notice that your internal dialogue changes. The voice that once doubted your worth grows quieter. The fear of being too much or not enough loses intensity. You begin to experience yourself as someone who can be loved without distortion. This realization does not inflate your ego, it grounds you. You feel more real, more embodied, more at ease. Quiet depth also means the bond does not rely on constant reassurance. There is an underlying sense of connection that does not need to be repeatedly proven. You trust what exists because it has been consistent. This trust allows you to focus on living rather than monitoring the relationship. Love becomes part of the background structure of your life rather than its consuming foreground. Through this integration, you begin to accept paradox. You learn that love can be calm and profound at the same time, that safety does not eliminate passion but refines it, that depth does not require suffering. These realizations reorganize your expectations. You stop seeking highs and lows as evidence of authenticity. You recognize stability as a form of intensity that unfolds slowly. This bond allows you to grieve what never was without clinging to what is. Past relationships, unmet needs, old identities lose their grip, not because they are denied, but because something more coherent has taken shape. You no longer need to repeat old patterns to understand them. Awareness replaces compulsion. Wholeness also shows up in conflict resolution. Disagreements do not threaten the existence of the bond. They are navigated with curiosity rather than fear. You are able to stay connected even when perspectives differ. This ability to hold tension without rupture deepens trust. You learn that unity does not require uniformity. As safety deepens, creativity emerges. You feel freer to imagine, to dream, to expand. Love becomes a base from which exploration is possible. You are not anchored by fear, but by support. This support is not controlling, it is enabling. You are encouraged to become more yourself, not less. Quiet depth means the bond does not need constant validation from the outside. It does not depend on approval, comparison, or performance. It exists in its own rhythm. This inward orientation strengthens it. What matters most is what happens between you, not how it appears to others. Through this bond, love becomes a force of integration rather than division. You are not pulled away from yourself or from life. You are brought into alignment with both. Safety allows honesty. Honesty allows depth. Depth allows wholeness. And wholeness allows love to exist without distortion, without urgency, without fragmentation, as an ongoing process of becoming more coherent, more present, more rooted in reality, where connection feels less like an escape and more like a home you inhabit while continuing to grow, where love does not demand transformation through loss, but supports transformation through understanding, and where the quiet strength of the bond continues to integrate what was once scattered, creating an inner landscape that feels stable, meaningful, and alive without needing to declare itself complete.